What do you think is going on in the universe? I guess. Just to sharpen Molly's point a little bit.
Which universe? So we have these crazy tariffs right now.
Yes.
I mean, which universe are we talking about?
What's your basic view of why the universe exists in its current form?
I actually have no answer to that, and this maybe makes me the most shallow person in the universe.
No.
I spend no time asking it because, in a very practical sense, I know it's unanswerable. And why
is that? How do you know it's unanswerable?
It's unanswerable by us right now, I think. That's just my opinion. But I mean, this may seem like a digression, right? But I remember when I was in high school, like half of the known universe, I read Edith Hamilton's mythology, right? It is Edith Hamilton, right? Do I have that right? Okay, because there's so much on the hard drive that's gone, and I'm always amazed when something's still there. And I just remember thinking then and thinking now, like, people at every stage of human existence have been convinced that they solved the riddle. Like, we look back at their belief on why their beliefs about why certain things were happening in the natural world and in the universe. And we kind of laugh because it seems so crude and ridiculous. How do we know that the equivalent of this audience 1,000 years from now won't see us as being as kind of primitive and misinformed? And so that's what I mean by unanswerable. But
okay.
I'm deeply concerned, and I think you can be deeply concerned about these things and have them not be rooted in religion. I'm deeply concerned with looking back at a given week, a given year, a given month, and feeling good about the way I behaved, about the way I behaved toward other people, about the way I took care of myself. I'm deeply concerned with questions of what we all owe one another. But I just don't locate those in religion. And I have found to this moment in time, I haven't needed to feel like I'm doing some rough justice to those questions and to the sense of obligation I feel to lead an examined and constructive and purposeful life that shows as much consideration for my community as for my basic minute-by-minute desires and satiations.
Well, and I meet a lot of very committed religious people who I think are in the same zone, and that they're not concerned with these deep metaphysical, theological questions. They're concerned about how their community works and how their faith commitments cash out in their relationships with other people. So it seems like that line between people who are really pressed to answer these questions about the universe and those who think they're kind of irrelevant, that line cuts through non-believing and believing communities. It's not actually an atheist, agnostic, religious divide. Is that a fair response, though, Ross?
Well, let me say something about the ancient Greeks. I was trying to find a useful way in, so I wasn't just browbeating poor Frank. But so I think that perspective on religious debates is somewhat commonplace and also I think basically wrong, right? I co-taught a class at Yale last year with a friend of mine who's a philosophy professor and an atheist. And the conceit of the class was we were going to look at arguments about and around the existence of God and the meaning of the universe in the ancient world and the modern world, and sort of compare them and see, how much has changed, right? Is it the case that we have made all of this progress, and the ancient Greeks were just arguing about, spirits causing everything to happen in a sort of wild, bizarre, enchanted universe, and we've sort of progress beyond that and have a much more reasonable set of perspectives on the world. And this was not only my conclusion, this was, I think, also the conclusion of my friend and colleague, that in fact there's actually a tremendous amount of continuity in the kinds of questions that people ask about the world and the way they argue about it. And obviously, scientific progress creates changes in the kind of arguments and the way arguments are formulated. But, if you go back to the ancient world and look at the arguments that people who didn't believe in God or were deeply skeptical were making, they have a lot in common with the arguments that, for instance, you'll hear from an atheist physicist today about, how we should assume that the universe we're in is orderly, and rational and law-bound because it's just one of a near infinite number of universes, right? That, like this sort of multiverse hypothesis that if you watch Marvel movies, you're very familiar with, right? Like that has clear antecedents. They don't use the term multiverse, right? But when people in the ancient world are called upon to explain how the universe could exist without some kind of ordering intelligence behind it, they'll say, well, it must be that the universe is infinite and some parts of it are totally chaotic and ours just happens to be orderly. And they're doing the same kind of argument, right? There's real similarity there. And I think the same is true in arguments among religious groups and believers, right? Like, ancient peoples were not, in fact, sort of, they were not as simple-minded as, not that Frank was calling them simple-minded, but that there were, in fact, very sophisticated debates from the beginning about, polytheism versus monotheism, right? And, whether it made sense to believe in one God or many gods and all of those kind of things.
What about moral realism? Like, does it bother you? Is it a problem if you are acting on the basis of confident moral instincts that you can't provide a logical syllogism for? Or as long as they sort of work in the world, is that fine? And then I love your thoughts on this too. Like, is moral realism something that we really need? And does that change depending on our cultural moment? So as we are seeing in our own culture, maybe you could have this, you could post this as a global question too. Are we seeing a kind of breakdown in a consensus over what's sort of clearly good and what's clearly evil that is going to make the stakes of whether or not moral claims are based in a metaphysical reality important in the way that they haven't been, as we're sort of been coasting on the fumes of Christendom for the past few generations?
Wow. We're definitely seeing an enormous difference of opinion about what is good and what is not good. My mind keeps flashing back to Washington, and my mind keeps flashing back to all the self-professedly religious people who are enthusiastically supporting and backing and propping up Donald Trump. This is the most quotidian, basic, unsophisticated, non-metaphysical, not worthy of a university, but kind of realpolitik observation question. But I don't, for the life of me, understand how Carolyn Levitt can stand there at a lectern with a gold cross hanging from her neck and lie and defend the cruelty of an administration and a president who would send, by administrative error, a man to a hellhole in El Salvador and then fight all the way to the Supreme Court not to bring him back. So are our notions of good and evil screwed up right now? Yeah.
So again, I feel like Molly is tempting me towards this like cross-examination that I do. But so why is it wrong to send a human being to a cruel prison? Like, what does it mean to say that that's wrong from your perspective?
We could take this in any number of directions.
Well,
are you asking me
is that a fact about? Do you
are you asking me, is it wrong to send anyone for any reason to that? Or are you asking me about due process and presumptions of innocence and that sort of thing?
I'm asking you this: if you say it's wrong to send an innocent human being, or maybe any human being, to an inhumane prison, and you say, 5 + 5 = 10. To you, are those similar statements or different statements?
Well, they're different.
Are they both true?
They're different in terms of one is quantifiable and you cannot really have a debate about it. 5 + 5 is 10. And the other one you can have a debate about.
It's a strong statement, but I'll allow it.
The other one you can have a debate about because unless we're saying that arithmetic is an invented language, blah blah blah. Yeah, right. I get it. Yeah. But the other one, certainly there are all sorts of details and variables that would come into the conversation and that might lead people to have divergences of opinion. I think it's wrong on a really basic level that I don't need a creed or a set of commandments or a God to tell me to treat someone cruelly for no good reason, to consign someone to pain and torment for no good reason is immoral.
Okay, End of story. You've just restated it, but why is it immoral?
because it's not.
Persuade me.
But I think you seem to want me to say that, like, I would not have that belief if I hadn't had religion infused into me in various ways during my life. I think we can have those beliefs as people living in community, as people just with this wonderful degree of intelligence that maybe it is God-given, maybe not. I don't think that belief only arises from some sort of subconscious or subtle religious inculcation over time, if that's what you're asking me.
I'm not asking about inculcation, I guess. I do think that you believe that for reasons that are connected, whether or not to your own personal experience, to a larger inheritance from a religious tradition.
Which came first, the chicken or the egg?
What if we put it this way?
Is it because we have these notions of morality and then we validate them, and we kind of like elucidate them and codify them in religion, or does the morality come from the religion?
Well, I think you can pretty straight. Wait. You wanted me to put so.
All right.
So I think in certain cases you can actually identify some pretty clear breaks. Like there are situations where moral ideas clearly evolve really slowly over time. But in the case of the view that cruelty to weak parties is vile and inhumane, there is a pretty clear break in Western history with the rise of Christianity, right? Like the Roman pagans. I was just defending the continuity of ancient arguments and modern arguments, but I'll set that aside and say there is a pretty clear break in how people regard the dignity of the weak and the obligations of the strong that is connected to the crucifixion of Jesus Christ and its impact on Roman and Western culture, right? So that is, I think, a case where an event enters human history or an idea enters human history that shapes community and is not simply shaped by community. But just to push a bit deeper, I guess what I'm trying to get at is I think that the person who doesn't want to say that there exists that there's some kind of transcendent moral architecture and wants to say that actually we can just sort of come to strong moral absolutes through a kind of collaborative process is suggesting that in the end it is kind of an aesthetic choice, right? Like you have a strong...
Or a survival advantage,
or a
right?
survival
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the whole Nicholas Christakis argument, is that actually we are, like, natural selection and evolution bring us toward communitarian values and caring for each other, because that actually is how the species survives. That's what his whole book Blueprint was about, for example.
Right, but those arguments, again, like if I was pointing a gun at someone and you were trying to persuade me not to shoot them, and it was clearly in my immediate interest to shoot them, right? I would benefit in some way. You would not persuade me not to shoot them by saying, have you read Nicholas Christakis' book Blueprint, which shows that actually, having a community that doesn't shoot people is good for the survival of the human species. That would not be a
So I should instead say you're going to go to hell.
You should, well, you don't have to say
that's where this is going, right?
You should suggest that I am doing something that will, you could say.
Damn you.
You could say that will. How about that will imperil my very being and separate me from what I am supposed to be as a human being.
But does the utility of that argument ipso facto make it true?
No, absolutely not.